Shall we?
Let's jump in.
Okay. So, welcome to this virtual presentation and pre-submittal meeting. We're really excited that so many of you could join us. I know it's everybody gets Zoom fatigue at this point in the day these days, but we really appreciate your spending some time with us and learning all about this great opportunity and also about how to propose for public art. We're really excited that Laura Spalding Best is able to give a presentation. I'll fill you in on all kinds of wonderful things regarding Laura in a minute, but first I want to start by introducing myself and having the public art team introduce themselves. I'm Rebecca Bloom Rothman. I'm the director of Tempe Public Art, and happy to have everyone join us. And then Christine, you want to go because you're next to me in the box?
Hi everyone, I'm Christine Beatty. I'm a public arts assistant with the City of Tempe, and I work alongside Rebecca and Sophia.
And then Sophia.
Hi everyone, I'm Sophia. I'm a public art specialist. I work with Rebecca and Christine.
Thank you all. Again, thanks for bearing with us, technologically speaking. Tempe Arts and Culture, many of you have seen part of this presentation before. Some of you haven't, but I thought I'd give you a brief moment to see kind of who we are, what we do, and give you a little bit of background. We are small but mighty. We work with all kinds of city departments and residents and artists and partners of all sorts to create works around the city, both built environment works, ephemeral works, temporary pieces. One thing that we've realized over time is that public art's a little tricky. It sort of takes a project to get a project. So the question is always, how do I get my foot in the door? How can I get that first project? And one of the tactics that we've put out are these workshops, the Public Art Insights, to have other artists who are working in public art share some tips and share some information that helped them get into this field. And then also to create a couple of opportunities that are really focused on artists who are professional artists who are working hard in the field but haven't gotten a public art commission with a municipality before. So one of these projects, which we'll talk about tonight, is the Tempe Town Lake opportunity. The application deadline is October 12th. It is open right now. You'll see it on our website. If you need the link, we can provide it for you, but I assume you're here because you've seen the link. And it's open to all Arizona artists who have not received a public art opportunity or commission with a municipality in the past. A little bit about us. We work with a variety of different entities, and one area that we really shine is in capital improvement projects. It's basically how the city builds itself. If you're a cyclist, a runner, you've likely been on the pathway around Tempe Town Lake, and when you get to McClintock, you know that you'd have to go up and cross at McClintock at Tempe Marketplace. Well, our transportation department worked with the Arizona Department of Transportation to extend that pathway, and in doing so realized that they were going to have a big giant concrete wall, and came to us and said, can you work with us and do something? And we said, yeah, we can. And I really like showing this project specifically because Zach Valent, the artist who did this piece, had never worked on a public art commission before. Zach is a sculptor. He lives in Tempe. He had been out of school a few years, and he works in concrete and does a lot of sculptural pieces, but he'd never had the opportunity to work large. He did, however, have some experience renovating homes and working in construction. So he understood materials, he understood what could go into it. And his response to the call was to say, you know, instead of doing something that's on top of it, let's do something that's integrated into it. And now, of course, I can't get this to move. There we go. So the end result, it is finished. You can socially distance yourself and get outside and see Zach's piece at the McClintock Underpass. What you're seeing are powder coated steel and hand cast concrete tiles that are embedded into the wall. Another thing we do is we help facilitate the neighborhood grant program with our neighborhood services department. Neighborhoods, both homeowners associations and neighborhood associations throughout Tempe, have the ability to apply for grant funds to do improvements in their neighborhoods. And one thing they can apply to do is create public art. So these are grassroots resident initiated art projects, and we help facilitate, once they select an artist, we help facilitate the contracting and the development and the installation of the artwork, and then we maintain it as part of the public art collection. Very few people realize that Tempe has an art and private development ordinance. Commercial developments that are over 50,000 square feet are required by ordinance to have a work of art on their premises that's publicly accessible. They can opt to pay out and pay in lieu of, which gives us funds to do other art programs throughout the city. But most of the time they do like hiring an artist, and we help them along that process. So we're sort of the go-between with planning and development and the artist and the property owner throughout that process. And it gives a lot of assets to the city in terms of what residents and tourists and anybody who visits Tempe gets to experience. And then we come to my favorite, and tonight's big star, the temporary projects. The thing I love about temporary is that they are just that. They are temporary. They're up for 6 months to 2 years tops, and that gives artists the opportunity to try it. A lot of artists will come to me and say, you know, I'm really interested in public art, but I'm a little freaked out at this idea of having something be permanent. And what if I don't like the way it comes out? And my feeling is, try a temporary piece because it's temporary. So we were really, really fortunate. We worked with the gallery at Tempe Center for the Arts last year. They did an artist in residence program, and Laura Spalding Best was one of the 3 artists, and all 3 artists were given some hands-on training in public art and some opportunities to create a proposal that would be implemented around the vicinity of Tempe Town Lake. As it turned out, for various reasons, Laura was the only one of the 3 who jumped on this, and I think she was raring to go and really presented a very clear proposal, told us exactly what she wanted to do, why she wanted to do it, and why it was a good fit for her work. And I will say that in the selection process, it's not us as staff that get to make these choices. We bring in selection panelists from outside. They're artists, arts professionals, a member of our commission. We, again, facilitate the process, but we're not making the actual selection. So when Laura was giving her proposal, she was so clear and so definitive in exactly what she wanted to do and how she wanted to do it that there were no questions from the panel. They knew. And so when we started talking about this opportunity and the chance to help educate some artists who are new to public art, who better than to share how to make a proposal than Laura Spalding Best?
All right. Is everybody seeing what I'm seeing?
Yes.
My
Yes.
beautiful name. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. What I'm going to do is just walk you through what my proposal actually was. I feel like that's really the best way to share this insight and information. And I think that you'll see that what I wanted to at the time connect to the most, and what I wanted to try to convince a room of people of, is that my own artistic practice informed and influenced every decision that I made when I was proposing this project. And I wanted to be able to find a way to share this information with people that maybe were not necessarily art people. Because when I got this opportunity to kind of pitch an idea, there were a lot of different people in the room. Some of them were landscape design people. Some were from the city in different kind of offices, and this was probably like a really fun part of their day, but it was definitely not something that they were always weighing in on. And so I decided to kind of introduce my work from the very beginning and walk them through that and show them how I got to kind of this crazy idea of putting 123 street signs on a hillside and being like, you should let me do this, you know? So I'm going to take you through my PowerPoint that I made then. So this was just about a year ago, a little over a year ago. And what I did was come prepared with a PowerPoint, but then in that room where I was able to give the presentation when we could all be in the same room at the time, I also had brought a physical layout, and I brought a couple of street signs that I had painted as examples because I wanted something physical to pass around. So when I get to that part, we'll kind of talk about that a little bit more, but let's start out with context. This is probably the thing that I'm the biggest believer in. I have work in the public. I have murals and things in downtown Phoenix. I've had several kinds of those great opportunities that are either associated with, like, you know, an art gallery or with a local business. And I always try to make sure I feel really good about who I'm working with. You know, I have one big mural with a credit union downtown, and I really like them and their, you know, their mission and what they stand for. But also, it's really important to me that my public work is a reflection of my studio work, and that's kind of hard when you're an oil painter who works on found objects and you know, and paints the landscape. You have to make sure you're translating something that's still a really authentic part of your work. And that's the biggest advice I would give everybody, is that a successful project is going to originate from your work, and it's not something that you've crafted to suit the people, to suit the public, because I think really great things can come from extensions of your work that you do on a smaller scale. And I think that you see that with a lot of great public artists, is that their extension into the public from their studio work. So, so this is what I had to tell people who knew nothing about me and nothing about my work, is that I have been pursuing the urban landscape, particularly of the Valley, but just generally of the Southwestern United States for, I mean, it's almost 20 years now. I've been really doing, really going after this kind of subject matter for a long time. So I'll be looking at utility, I'll be looking at power lines and power structures, all of these lines and channels and ways that we communicate. Such an important thing right now when you're looking at how we are able to live in an urban desert environment, where our power and water comes from, how we're all connected to each other. So here's some early pieces where I'm showing, this is my old neighborhood in Tempe. I'm showing every single utility pole on Roosevelt Street, where we lived at the time. And I always want to show and quantify these things that you can't see it simultaneously. So you'll never be able to look at all of these poles laid out in this way. And so I kind of made these kind of mandala kind of designs, and you can see some objects there. I'll just kind of go through some of this, you know, the parts that I really appreciate about the landscape, the beauty that I see in power lines, in highways, places that, I mean, things that we could maybe consider eyesores, but that are just intrinsically part of our environment. And I try to find a way to really separate those, and celebrate those. So you can see these things that are very uniquely Arizona, in like the highway design and the palm tree. And so I'm showing these because these are kind of more standard paintings for me. They're all on metal. I'm not really on found object. There's some Tempe ones, and I specifically tossed those in because I was pitching a public art presentation for the city of Tempe. Some older pieces, yeah. And so here's where is my chance to talk about why I choose to paint on metal and objects, because you can see this is these are these copper plated pieces of sheet metal, and this is kind of an image from my daily commute. I drive over McDowell to and from work. So I live in Phoenix and I work in Scottsdale, and I'm always passing these Papago Buttes, and so I'm letting the copper come out of them, letting them really feel like that earth, like the state of Arizona. You know, we're copper mining, but then, you know, it's these two panels that are divided, and so this is kind of the beginning of looking at my work as installation. and seeing that divide, that divide is a man-made road. That divide isn't there naturally, right? And so some of these things are sort of symbolic how I can point those out. So found objects. This is the next kind of segue as I slowly lead into the proposal that I will make to explain a little bit more about me and my background is that I work on found objects almost exclusively. And so I really have a starting point for any painting that I'm deciding to make. Any composition is informed by an object. So a lot of times you'll have these sort of domestic scenes. One of the reasons this is the greatest trick I've ever pulled is that I don't ever have to frame my work because it's pre-framed. If you look at these trays and these decorative kind of objects that I find at thrift stores, that I find at salvage places, and an alarming number that are just given to me by people that are scouring places for me. Oops, I got lost. There we go. And then here's one where we've got one flowing from one to another. But this kind of imagery, you'll see it's pretty consistent. These are local landscapes of the urban desert environment. And here we go, where I start working in series. So this is that same area I showed you over the Papago Buttes. This is my commute again, and you can see that it goes. It's sort of in order. It's taking you on this trip over that hill and down into Phoenix. You can see I'm chasing a bus at the end there, those last 5 knobs. So those are all found objects. They're just drawer pulls. They're ceramic drawer pulls, so they're about that big. So I'm showing teeny tiny works when I'm about to propose a really large installation, but you can kind of see how that all works. For me, scale is just that. It's just scaling up. I really find that painting something really detailed and small it takes me almost the same amount of time and thought as to project that. Well, I don't use projections, but to scale that up to be a larger piece, like a mural. So more found objects. This is kind of introducing the mirage into my work. Some of my early work that features the mirage. It's a really important metaphor for me in my work. The inferior mirage is what we see on the asphalt on the streets. You can see it all year round in Phoenix especially. But all that it really means is that there's a temperature difference on the ground to the air above it, and light is refracted, and it gives that illusion of water. Everybody's really familiar with that, but it's such a great metaphor because you can see a mirage, you can photograph a mirage. It's an optical phenomenon, but you can never catch it. You can never reach it. You will never be in it. And so I love that this tantalizing, sparkly thing that looks like water, in the desert, and you're never quite going to get there. A lot of promises of settling the West and that kind of thing. So here I've included this one because this is an oil painting I did on a stop sign. I had several pieces where I'd already used street signs in my work. And here's where I really talk about how I use multiple pieces in installations. So I really view my paintings as installations. It's rare when I'll make just one sort of rectangular painting, something that is standard kind of, that you would expect to be equally spaced away from each other on a wall. I usually think of my pieces in groups. So these first 2 are close-ups. These are all done on, they're like these warning signs that you would put in front of a dangerous electrical area, but they depict every single utility structure on Roosevelt Street downtown. So that's kind of the Roosevelt Row areas, like it's the arts district downtown Phoenix. And it goes from 7th Avenue to 7th Street. And there's 32. Well, there's probably more now. There's 32, and so this is in the old hot box gallery, which are now on the other side of the street downtown. So this is 32 of them in a row, and it's great because it's really reflecting the direct environment around it. But you can kind of see the impact that they have all together. You know, they support each other as a group, but they live as individual paintings. So I really believe in the strength in numbers and the saturation and impact. There's so often when I see something that I really like, but I'm like, oh, I just wish you made more of that though. And that's really never, so, you know, I have to hold myself to that. That's never really lacking in my work. I always make too much. So there's some more of those. Here's some early, very early, this is probably 2008, 2000, maybe before then, 2006. This is from when I was a member of 515 Arts Collective downtown. So you can see I was already working with similar found objects and working them in series. The one on the right here shows the APS power station that was in Tempe. Right there, it's, you know, close to the lake. Okay, and so here's really great because you kind of see this field of paintings. This is a group of paintings that I call Known Waterfalls of Greater Phoenix. And they're all these man-made waterfalls. And they're like portraits of waterfalls that are mostly in front of you know, condominiums or in parks. And they're all fake rocks. And they're kind of depicted here as like flooding over endlessly. And there's no horizon lines in them. It's just this like flood of terrible blue chlorinated water. But I sort of treated them like I was discovering them, like it was this phenomenon. So it's a very tongue-in-cheek kind of project. But so I made a map, and there's just 52 here. Oh, I'm sorry, there's 60 here. And I have like a list of 40 more. So that's an ongoing project. And I add more to them every time. This is the piece that I had in the, this right here is at Chartreuse from 2016, but it was in the 2018 Arizona Biennial at the Tucson Museum of Art. And then, okay, so now we're looking at these objects that are really literally connected to each other. I use that mirage metaphor I have in that top plate, the one you're looking at on the left. The mirage is sort of the melting point for that. It's the impetus for all of this, you know, that heat and asphalt to flow from one dish to the other down the wall. And you lose a little bit of image like you do in a mirage. You lose a little bit of that with every dish. And when you get to the bottom one, you're just down to paint and there's no imagery. And it's just sort of this like puddle of paint. But you can see how I'm kind of shifting the way I'm working with my objects. And so then here's the public murals that I have executed before. So this is downtown at Garfield and 2nd Streets, kind of catty corner from Film Bar, but it is the back wall of the APS power substation there. And it's mimicking the Arizona state flag. And you can see that kind of star in the middle as the negative space. And all of those poles I chose because they're directly from that area of downtown. So you can look standing there and you can spot each one that are all connected there. And it's been there since, that one's called Centennial. It's been there since 2012. Still holding up. And then here's some more experimental small murals that I did on the shipping containers a few years ago. So this was the first time I painted a mirage. This was a huge change in my work for me, but you can see the mirage reflected there, and then it's such a reflection of its own environment with these palm trees literally sticking up right behind it. But it was this kind of palette is really informative for a lot of my work going forward, especially public work. And a little detail of that. But the amount of negative space that I decided to leave in a mural is something that will come up a lot for me. And then this is another one that's kind of based off those early radial telephone poles they did on the other. That one is still there, it's just hidden because it's smooshed between two other shipping containers. This is a secret mural. Little detail. And then here's this very loosey-goosey watercolor that I made when I pitched the mural that I did for Marisol Credit Union, which is at Grand Avenue and Roosevelt. Well, it's like 15th and Grand Avenue and Roosevelt. And there's these these 8 little vignettes. And it was also a really good way to convey my studio work to a public space where I often work on these trays, you can see them behind me, that are circular and gives you a circular composition, and they're all sort of connected to each other. So what I did was I made these 8 vignettes. They go from sunrise through midday to sunset, and it takes you through a day like that. And they're all connected to each other. So I break the plane in some of them. I've established these circles and I've made rules so I can break the rules. And so you see the street light is jutting out of one. All of them, the power lines are running to each other. So it's this long connected thing, so that it really becomes one continuous piece. There's more of the finished product. That concept is really big, and it keeps echoing through my work from there. So I like the full circle. I like starting at sunrise, and I like ending with sunset, and taking your eye through the different changes and shifting in colors in the sky, and bringing it together to still make it a whole. Snuck a little mirage in there. A little mirage. There you go. Oh, there's me. Oh. Okay, so just a couple. I'll go through these ones quickly. These are smaller murals, but I wanted to share that with the people that I was proposing to, so they could just see more of my public work, because I didn't have any municipal public art projects. Like Rebecca said, I am like everybody else, and struggled to wonder how I was going to get my foot in the door at all. This is another one that's for a business. I hadn't even gotten beyond the RFQ stage, I don't think, for any public project. And it's one of those things that can be quite frustrating, because you've got like exhibitions lined up, you're selling work, you get grants, but like I could not snag a public art project if my life depended on it. And I think that there's a little intimidation there as well. That factor, it seems like, well, that's just like a lot of work before you even know if you're going to get into anything. And so starting out on this kind of small scale, temporary public art project was really good for me. I don't have many doubts that I can see a project through because of the job that I do and what I'm good at executing and putting together projects. But to get to the stage where someone would trust me to have one is I think the leap that I struggle with, and I think that everybody probably relates to. I'm gonna take you through these briefly. These are, again, kind of they tell a story. This is for, these are private, that only employees can see these. And they're at a mortgage company, and they just asked, they didn't give any direction. They were just like, can you somehow relate these to home? And so this is sunrise. It's like this busy construction and building. It's a new day, right? So it's kind of like the beginning of a journey. This is like midday. It's like this road trip, just a very easy kind of metaphor for life, of this ongoing, there's always another bend in the road. And then it's, coming home. So it's evening. It's the light is mostly emanating from the house and the street lights. And so that's another time I've used my full circle. I want to take you through kind of the shifting day. Oh, and then I just went right into it. Wow, look at that. So you can all see that. So this is I guess a pretty good summary of it. So, but I should start back real quick, because Rebecca mentioned that I got to be an artist in residence at Tempe Center for the Arts, and that was the summer where the theme of that exhibition and of the residency was water. So you've seen kind of the work I have with mirages and resources, and it was a really good fit for me to even apply to that residency. So I got to be an artist in residence and sit there in their gallery and paint. It was like great. It was like summer camp, vacation, everything. I was happy every time I was there. And I was always looking out the window there, because the windows face north. And so I would see across the side to the other side of Tempe Town Lake. And Rebecca took us on a little public art tour one morning, and we walked across the bridge and we looked at, you know, a couple of the small pieces of public artwork over there. And it just always struck me how, you know, especially it was the summertime, it was just, it's not like it's a dead area. It's just what any desert hillside probably looks like that isn't, you know, getting soaked with sprinklers. So it was just really brown and just kind of rough. Most of it's like brittle bush plants and stuff that are along that hillside. And I just wanted to bring color and something substantial to it. So when this kind of opportunity came, like just make a proposal and we'll see if it can be a temporary public art project. It was kind of a really large area that we could choose to claim, but it was, or choose to propose to rather, but it was all open. And so you've already seen what my public work is. It's murals on walls. Like, you know, there's no buildings there. There's no just freestanding walls. And so what I came up with after I found out that there was this potential resource that the city of Tempe has street signs that when they're going to replace them, they've been vandalized, they've been crashed into, there's all kinds of different reasons. They have their team go and pick them up and they bring them back to this place, which is conveniently located right across the street from Tempe Center for the Arts. And once I knew that was possible, I decided that rather than a regular mural on a building, what if I made my own background and substrate and gave it depth, and I was able to use objects like I use in my work, and what if we call it a field mural? And so that's kind of my, like, you know, trademark, not really, idea was that that's what I wanted to feel like as a field mural, just to think of it that way. So yay, there's the sign yard. So all that took was like one little meeting with Rebecca and I walking over across the street. And they're ridiculously helpful people who were like, look at all these signs. And I was like, a kid in a candy store. So this is the magic palette box that once I requested it, they started saving signs for me for the whole summer. So there's at least 2 months, maybe almost 3 months of signs that they saved. And it ended up being 180 which was incredible. And you can see they're really varied. There's stop signs, there's street signs, there's speed limit signs, there's, like, you know, no left turn, and they're all different sizes. So, and the way that they had this set up, I was like, yeah, that's kind of what I want to do. See, it's already, you know, composed as this sort of field of signs. So this is looking out from Tempe Center for the Arts. Is that wonderful pedestrian bridge that takes you across that way. And that's the hillside. So you can kind of see what I mean. This is sort of dead, brownish looking hillside. And wouldn't it be great if something was out there to draw you over there, to show you color from far away and to get you to want to walk closer, to ride your bike closer, and go see what it is. And so that was kind of the spot that I proposed. So that's, you know, you can see the Tempe Center for the Arts building there is pretty distinctive on the lower left part of the screen. And if you look across there, there's the pedestrian bridge and there's the bridge, the train bridge. And so in the middle there is kind of the area that I'm looking at. So there I have it mapped out. So it's up that rise of hill across from the beach. And I was ready to say, or, you know, it could be here. Oh, this shows how large I would want it to be. It actually ended up being significantly smaller than this. As soon as you get into wide open public spaces, suddenly 55 feet is, you know, just a little drop in the bucket. But so like here, this is what I was going to say. I was very flexible, and, you know, Rebecca advised me towards that way as well, just to say I've got all these options. Yeah, this you know, that middle one, that's where I really want it to be, but I could do it here, I could do it here, I could do it here. And this was kind of the general range of paint colors that I gave them. And my actual palette in the end was, I believe, 13 unique paint colors. And I only ordered quarts of paint, and it was more than enough to complete the entire project, which is pretty crazy. So here's my little rendering. And so this was kind of imaginary at this point. I didn't have the street signs. I'd only seen what I could have possibly, and I didn't know if I was going to get the proposal approved. So I just kind of chose the, actually the correct size signs, and I made this arrangement. And I wanted to show it on just a rise of hill, but it's enough because I'm just sort of describing a proposal. So I made this in SketchUp, and I'm a very lazy SketchUp user. I use it all the time for work. I make layouts for my museum for galleries and share them with artists all the time, but I'm not an architect, and I don't use CAD or anything like that. So this is really the tool for me to use when I'm doing proposals. And so this was to show what kind of signs they are, and it's really funny because they end up being the reverse of this. So then I just blocked them out with color, kind of showed them that what I really want is to make a piece that depicts the sky in real tones going from sunrise to midday to sunset. And so I have these pinks and peaches and yellows. They're really quite garish on the SketchUp program. There's not much choice there. And then I have sky blues in the middle of differing shades and shifting lights. And then I go to deeper blues and purples at sunset. And that would be configured on the hillside as east to west also. So we would really go really naturally with the environment. On the east side is the sunrise, and on the west side is the sunset. And I knew that I would have them arranged in different depths so that the ones in the front would sort of hide the hardware and the stakes that the signs would require to stay in place, so that they would kind of build together to form this like one overarching kind of composition. And for me, that's this semicircle. It's like a rising sun. It's on the rise of a hill and is depicting, part of a sunrise. And that's kind of where the name Rise came from for the proposal. But I wanted it to go deep up the hill. I wanted you to be able to walk among the signs, and I wanted you to be able to stand behind the signs. I wanted it to feel like you were in that environment. It's something that people can easily walk by or bike by, and they can take it in a certain way. But you can also get really intimate with this piece. And that's what I wanted people to be able to experience. And I wanted also to be able to see them see something that they completely understand and recognize transformed, because we all know what street signs look like. They're surrounding us all the time. That's kind of the power of found objects for me. And how I look at these as found objects as well, is that there's already a recognition that people have, and that makes them identify with you, and it feels like you're sharing something that you're both in on from the beginning. That's why I love working with objects in the first place. And I think street signs, just that shape is enough, and so that was kind of the end of that presentation. I also shared with them this adorable little paint swatch model that I had made that really showed the tones a lot better than the ones that I had in the plan. And so, and then I passed around the signs so that everybody could also physically touch them. That was kind of important to me at the time, for the people that I didn't really know where their mind was at. Even during the presentation, you don't really necessarily get a lot of like encouraging nods or, applause or anything like that. So you're just like, gosh, I hope I'm reading this room right. But I wanted them to be able to like touch and hold something that was an example of it. And so that they could see the scale when I was saying, yeah, I want like a few hundred of these signs. They were like, wow, I'm holding one. That would be really big. I think that helps to put people there for them to see it. So this is just, I'm just gonna end with a little bit of the actual installation, because it was the most fun. It all worked out. It got approved. We planned it. Sophia and Rebecca were super supportive. We'd had to do a lot of things to get the hillside ready. It's all staked and flagged. And I had an intrepid team of three people that are wonderful art handlers like myself that I paid to work with me to carry the project out, and then like this endless team of volunteers of wonderful people who were just excited to help dig holes in the hillside. It's incredibly tough, super hard packed desert dirt with lots of river rocks in it. That's just a heads up. And it took us 2 days to install it, which was as planned. It's a temporary art project, so it's a relatively small budget, and I wanted to make the most of it. And so you can see here, I painted the signs at home in my studio, one by one, just a sign painting factory for a few weeks. And they are painted with multiple colors on each sign, but they're painted, the various shades of the sky. You can kind of see even now that the blues are leaning towards that middle of the day blue sky. That's the idea, is that you could match you could find a match no matter what time of day it was. But also all of them have little details. So they have small depictions of utility poles, airplanes, power lines. It's a really crazy flight path to the airport there at Tempe Town Lake. And I loved depicting that and kind of sharing that in the piece. So, and there we go, now we're installed. That's it in the spring. It was amazing because all the bushes were growing up into it and over it, kind of just like I had hoped they would. And it was so green and so yellow and lovely. And now, of course, it's all just, brittle and sad again, but there's beautiful signs there to make you happy. There's some details so you can kind of see palm trees, stoplights, billboards, street lights. And then in the front, which I haven't really touched on, I made a mirage. So, which I probably did talk about in my proposal, but in the different kind of layouts of street signs, there are 22 stop signs in this composition, just bananas. But they're in the front row are all the street signs. So in Tempe, there's that really standard green with white lettering street signs, right? And I had so many of those. That was by far the most common sign that they had for me. And so I lined the front of the installation with that. And what you can see, if you look closely at that one that's in the center there, it's sort of a peach and yellow one. It has a billboard on it. You can see that billboard is reflected in a mirage below. So the street signs that lined the front, they reflected the colors back onto itself, so that the whole installation was reflected in mirage along the bottom. And obviously that little component, getting that in there was so in keeping with my work that it was really important to me to include that. And then that's the back side, because I painted on the aluminum part of the signs, the metal part of the signs. That's incidentally where the city of Tempe had all their stickers that they needed me to cover up, anything that had barcodes and stuff like that. They were like, you can use these however you like, you just have to cover that part up. So I said, okay, I'll paint on that side. And so it's this whole other installation from the back, which is really funny because when you're standing there looking at it, it's sort of a really negative thing, like all these rules telling you what you can't do. It's also kind of wonderful too, because I love when an object, when I'm using a found object, when it still retains its character and almost its function. And so in this way, I'm still sharing exactly what they are, which I love. There you go. Always good to get the planes flying overhead. And so, and then it also achieves the purpose that I wanted as well. I wanted it to work from far away, and I wanted it to work up close as a whole other thing. So you can see it and maybe be like, I wonder what that is across the lake from far away. But I really wanted you also to be rewarded if you were so brave enough to come up close, that you could see these details, that you could walk among these signs, get closer to it. I wanted it to be, that just like kind of one step further if you were going to explore the piece. And I think that's it. That is all my slides.
So thank you, Laura. If you have questions specifically for Laura, we have the chat box available here now.
There is a few, so I'm gonna read some out. for you, Laura. Sarah Spencer asked if you used oil or latex paint on the signs.
Excellent question. So every time I do murals, I use exterior latex paint. I use Dunn Edwards because I pretty much always use Dunn Edwards, but so everything that I use there is exterior flat paint, and that's what I use in all my murals downtown that have stood the test of time. And yeah, I wouldn't be able to have oil paint go that far, and I also wouldn't want that kind of sheen for a public piece. But choosing the paint for this kind of work was, I knew always it was temporary, and that definitely informs certain things. If this was a permanent piece, I mean, that's a whole other for Rebecca and Sophia. This is a logistical nightmare if we're going to make this a permanent piece. So that there was always a freedom of this being able to be more experimental because it was a temporary piece. And then the elements definitely affect the piece. I do maintenance on it often, and every few weeks. And luckily it's in such a public area. I rarely have to go and say, I'll go look at it by myself and see if it needs maintenance. I get texts and messages from people that were like, hey, I was riding my bike and there's some mud on the front, or like one sign looked like it was kind of sideways or something. And then I go and fix it. And, I always want it looking its best, of course. And then you said, how long did the entire process take? So I got the approval. You guys might have to fill in the month that I gave the proposal, Rebecca, because I don't exactly recall.
It was right around this time of the year. It was like early September.
Mm-hmm.
And it was pretty quick, actually.
It was very quick turnaround for when I was actually installing it. Because I installed it the first few days of November. So it was a really short turnaround. So I produced all this, or all my part on the signs. I produced within, it was about a month or so. And yeah, and then installing it was 2 days. So, oh, and that was actually the next question. So.
There's another question here. When you did the box murals, do you have permission for that?
The box murals. Which part is that? I'm not sure what you. Oh, the shipping box. The shipping containers. Yeah. Yes, they were part of. I was invited to do them. They're part of an exhibition at the time. It used to be the hot box shipping container gallery that Greg Esser had kind of done, and then it was Halt Gallery, and I had a show with them, and they asked me to do a mural for the opening of that show. And then the other one was kind of a replacement mural. So yeah, that was kind of it was a small scale situation, but it was an invitational kind of thing, yeah. And I mean, if someone's asking about is the artist responsible for the upkeep? In this case, that was part of the contract. It was part of what we talked about. We knew that there would be that. So, I'm not sure how much things like that vary, but I would imagine that for temporary stuff, it would be, you would be asked as the artist to do the upkeep.
It does vary. And in this case, that's actually something that I was going to address in the pre-submittal meeting. What we found is that because of the ground, because of the situation, every time there was a giant rainstorm or a windstorm, these pieces would waver. And who better than to repair a piece than the artist herself? That being said, it's not always typical. If there's, a situation that's, Mother Nature has a moment, we will pay the artist to come back out. So what was starting to happen is Laura was going out and checking on the piece and getting calls from people. And so we did actually add to the contract to make sure that she could maintain it throughout the lifespan. And whatever, depending on the piece, we've had a couple pieces that get damaged by, the public. They're temporary. If we can fix them, we will. But yeah, if it's temporary, we generally put that into the artist contract for maintenance.
And it's definitely true that, when I go to install it at the end of its run, the signs will be very different from when they were first put into the ground. There are like, it is out in nature. There's like some amazing spider webs that are on some of them, and I do not remove those. But I do clean off bird droppings often. There's a lot of collaborations that happen, when your work is outside.
And I'll say with permanent pieces that we maintain as part of the collection, there's a lot of bird droppings on those, and we're not cleaning them off every day. So, I mean, those pieces get maintained, but it does a lot of time in between.
Yeah.
And that's something to, going back to the question of the elements, that's something that you consider when you're choosing your materials and which ones you use. So like permanent for a longer term mural or painting application, you consider paints that are going to last long, colors that are not going to fade with the sun or the heat. You consider UV coatings. You consider you're not going to do paper in a place that, it might rain. And that was a very obvious one, but you consider, depending on the term of your installation and your piece, and you start considering materials for their longevity.
Yeah, and that's why I think my palette is reflective of my work, but it's also really intentional. You won't see oversaturated, reds and purples and things like that for me. They fade in the sun. There are what they call, it's in all paints, but what they call fugitive colors. And those are ones that you will see fade over time. And you won't see that. These are largely quite pastel, on this palette, even though some of the colors are really dynamic, and that has not shifted over the course of the year.
Okay, another question here that Papa is asking: what is the most important thing to consider applying when applying? And this can be for both of you.
I was going to say, I think that's a question that is best answered in the section after this, when we're talking about how to apply. But the number one thing I hear from panels over and over again is have the best possible photographs of your work. Your artwork samples are your calling card. That's the first thing that a panel is going to look at. If you don't have great photographs of your artwork, find a photographer who can do them for you. Trade. I tell artists all the time, trade. Photographers love artwork. I say that as somebody who used to do this, so I'm not speaking for every photographer. But really make sure that your images represent yourself and your artwork as best as they can possibly be represented. And here's a tip, and I'll say it again and again and again. When you submit and you're numbering your images, let's say you've got 6 images you're applying with, put your 2 strongest and your 4 strongest bookended. And I say that, people think I'm crazy. Why would I do that? Well, here's the thing. Panels, I've seen it a million times. Panels are going to look at your artwork and they're going to start by saying, okay, slide number 1. Ooh, wow, what's that? Slide number 2. Wow, that's really good work. Slide number 3. Okay, I like the beginning ones better. Slide number 4. And then you want to end strong. And I'm saying this, I know everybody thinks like you're attached to all your work. We all have pieces that are stronger than others. And you have to realize that at the beginning, that's when you catch a panel's attention. And at the end, that's what they're looking at when they're making a determination as to whether you are up to the task. So that's, I think, my strongest thing.
In case
Christine?
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Christine, you want to go? I was just going to say, like, when in terms of a proposal, because you're submitting images of what you're proposing, I think, and Lara can also pitch in, and Christine, but it's like how you communicate your idea in a way that it's like Laura said at the beginning, it's you're pitching to a panel that it's diverse. So how are you communicating your idea in a way that people are going to understand, and to people that might not have the visual sensitivity of imagining and putting themselves in the shoes of the artist and the brain of the artist. It's like, oh, I see what you're saying. This is cool. I would love to see it in real life.
Yeah, one of the things that I tend to do, and I have to remind myself all the time, is whenever I'm talking to someone about my work, I take leaps ahead instead of just starting at the very beginning. That's one thing that I really tried to slow myself down during my presentation and say, I'm a painter. Whoa, it's so weird. I paint on found objects. I know. I paint the landscape. And then, and I really wanted to guide them through that. And by doing it step by step, it worked so that they could really understand me completely, and then understand the new kind of crazier idea because of that. But still, you know, as far as the most important thing I would consider for applying is just making sure that it really is an extension of whatever work you're already doing, so that you can describe it really confidently, and so that you really are an expert in it because it's something that you already believe in doing.
And panelists do like to see that you're excited. So if you're excited, express that. If it's a project you're really eager to do, then explain why. You know, they do read your statements and enjoy to see that you're engaged and just want to know who you are as an artist.
And keep in mind that anything written is the only way that you can introduce yourself, because you got to get in the room to give the presentation, right? So your written material is how you let them know who you are, and that you're multidimensional. You're not just a name on a page.
Also, I was going to mention with photos, and Rebecca and Sophia, maybe you can remind me, but we learned about an app, I think it was called Snapseed, where even if all you have is your own phone, that app, I think that's what it was called. I will double check. But Snapseed, and it had a lot of really great tools for photo editing, and it was free and goes on your phone. And so if you don't have a camera, if you have trouble accessing someone with a camera and you just have your phone, this is an editing program that can even just, you know, amplify a photo to the next level. I will look it up.
Yeah. I will also say, when I was talking about the images of your work, I was going off on a tangent, and in the context of a proposal, the other thing is just to have a really good visual. So if you're not working photographically, and you know, some people are going to use SketchUp, other people are going to draw out their idea. Some people might make a physical model. Remember that when that is submitted, it's in a JPEG form, and that's the only visual that the panel has to go on. So it really needs to communicate well how you're thinking. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be 100% refined. I mean, you saw the rendering that Laura gave them alongside the actual piece, but it does have to give them some clue as to what this thing is going to look like.
Here's a question for Laura. Laura, what's going to happen to the sign, or for everyone, I guess, what's going to happen to the signs when the project comes to an end?
Why, you want one? I don't, I don't really have a plan for them yet. I have a tremendous amount of artwork at home. So, but I will be, you know, I'll be taking them down. The plan is to take them down in January, and I'll be packing them up, and we'll think about what will happen to them then. I mean, I hope that in some fashion they can be reinstalled, or I can use them again, or they'll go off into the world, maybe separate from each other. But right now there's no plan. I'll be bringing them home back to the studio.
Okay. I'm going to jump into the remainder here, if I can figure out how to do this. So the Tempe Town Lake project currently is, as Laura said, coming down in January, and that we're really flexible with timelines right now, as I think the rest of the world has to be. But what we're looking to do is to have an artist on board by November, so that that artist can work through some concepts and ideas. And it is a request for proposals. So what we're looking for is an artist to show us how he, she, or they think about this site. And I would encourage anybody who's interested in applying to go and take a look at the site. Something that we learned that we didn't realize is what was underground. Sophia became a total expert in what's known as blue staking, where the utility lines are. There was a lot of digging and pulling rocks out, as Laura and Sophia can attest to. There's a lot of stuff in this loose dirt, and it lines up right alongside the multi-use path. So we have a pretty active cycling community and runners and people who are coming by in various forms. And we have a little bit of vibration from the freeway too. So keep all of those things in mind. And I think going out to see the site, if you're looking to apply, would be a good idea. Again, if you need a little help, it's on the north side of Tempe Town Lake, just east of the bridge near the Tempe Center for the Arts. You can actually see the artwork from the Tempe Center for the Arts. The ground is soil and brush, and so the artwork would need to consider how it would be placed in the site in a stable manner. And we talked a little bit about Laura's piece and how it shifted and how we had to work with her. We'll work with the selected artist to figure out how to stabilize this piece, maintain it, et cetera, during its lifetime. I also want to point out, as I'm saying this, that a proposal is just that. It is a proposal. It is an idea. And we know, having worked on these kinds of projects, that there are modifications that may need to be made. And one of them may need to be about the stability of this piece and the mechanics of it. But that's what we're here to do, is to help an artist through that process. The details. This is straight out of the call. So if you've looked at the request for proposals, you've seen this. It is open only to artists who are residing in Arizona and who are eligible to work in the US. Priority will be given to artists who are new to public art and haven't received a municipal public art commission in the past. And that doesn't mean that you haven't done something. In other words, like maybe you've done an installation in a private space. Maybe you've done an installation in a museum or gallery. What it means is that you haven't had a commission with a city entity before, and you haven't worked on a public art project in the past. We're looking for an artist who can create a new site-specific work. And because it's a request for proposal, we're looking for the idea up front, which means if selected, you're going to come in with that idea and we're going to help you see if we can make it into a reality. Okay. The budget is up to $8,000, and that is all inclusive. So that includes materials, design, fabrication, any kind of assistance you might need. You heard Laura hired a team to help her do the installation. It also includes general liability insurance, which the city requires everyone to carry before working with the city. So some of you may have that already as an artist. A lot of artists work independently, but keep in mind that it's an all-inclusive situation. So how do you apply? Again, this is in the call. Because we want to know who you are, because we are more interested in opening the doors to public art to people who haven't had this opportunity, we want your bio. This is your chance to introduce yourself and describe what kind of skills you can bring to the project. And going back to my earlier comment, this is your chance to introduce yourself to a selection panel. We want digital images, 3 images that show up to, I should say, 3 images that show your proposed ideas, supported by 3 images of previously created work. So what does that mean, supported by? It means show us your ideas, your proposal, and then show us what you've done in the past, because what you've done in the past is going to show a panel that you can oversee an idea to fruition, right? Show the panel that you have the chops that you can do this. An image list. Tell us what we're looking at. It's real easy. Give us some specifics. How big is this thing? Or how big is this thing that you envision making? What is it possibly made out of? And I say possible materials because you might be selected, and then we're going to work with you and say, you know, really love the idea of cardboard. That's going to be dead in a month. So let's talk about some other materials and we'll help you through that. But again, a proposal is an idea. Give us a good fleshed out idea. There's an online application through Submittable. It's pretty straightforward, and we listed out these questions in the RFP so that you could have them ahead of time. Tell us what specific skills or experiences that you possess that could be valuable. And I say that because going back to the example of Zach's work, for example, right? Zach had never done a public art project before, but he had worked in home renovation and he knew how materials came together and he knew what construction was about. Laura had never done a public art project in this traditional sense before, but as an installer, she knows what goes on when you're putting a work of art together. She knows how to think spatially. These are valuable experiences to share with a panel. They will help them understand how you could make that leap. Tell us what your inspirations are for artwork. That tells a panel a lot about what inspires you, how you think, how you see the world, and how you're connected to your practice. What excites you, right? What about this specific site or opportunity is exciting? And what would you hope to gain from the project? And what would this do in expanding your creative practice? Basically, what are you bringing to this process? And what do you hope to take from the process if selected? So that's really it in a nutshell in terms of what you have to do to apply. And I'm going forward now. I can't go backwards because, of course. Sorry, I don't know. It's like not going to let me because all of your faces are blocking, and I can't get you to unblock, which is there. There we go. There's my arrows. Sorry. What do you need to do to get there? Well, all of these questions, our hope is that they're going to get you thinking about why public art's exciting, so that maybe the next application you go through, if it asks you for an artist statement, you have all the building blocks you need in answering these questions, if you can think about it that way. Public Art Insights, this is the second of 3. We have a third one on October 8th. Notice October 8th is a few days before the deadline on this opportunity. And it's about interviewing. How do you interview for projects? Mary Schindel is the artist who'll be presenting. And one of the interesting things that she and I have talked about with this presentation is she's going to talk about the difference between interviewing for a commission in COVID times, which means on a Zoom camera, versus in person, and kind of the tactics that she uses. So I really hope you can join us. I think it'll be a very helpful presentation. And then I also want to draw your attention to the fact that the Tempe Youth Library opportunity is open currently. This is a request for qualifications, not a request for proposals. So we are not looking for your ideas. We just want to see what you did in the past. The application deadline that it states here is September 21st, but I'm here to tell you that it just got extended to October 1st. So you're hearing it right from the program mouth. We are putting out the word, we're extending that deadline. As always, we have the chat box open. You're free to ask us questions, but if you leave this presentation and you're like, oh, I wish I would have asked whatever, you can reach myself, Sophia, or Christine via email at any time. We're here to help. We want to make sure that the artists in our community are successful and that we get some of the best pieces we can for the city. And I'm happy to stop the share and show our faces again. How's that?
I just posted all the links again, the survey, the call to art, and our emails, so you can get it from there. I'm one of those that forgets everything at the time and then remembers to ask something, and I want to ask. So feel free to send an email with your questions. I had one quick one for Laura in terms of just to kind of like finish it up. And it's, if there is one takeaway about this site to consider in coming up with this proposal, what would it be?
This is great because I felt like it's kind of like a takeaway. What I forgot to include was just my own just experience through the entire process of the work being on view. The biggest impact for me is how completely public and completely accessible it is. You know, you already know this in a way with public art, but you might just drive by some pieces. There's not always some that are intentionally in a pedestrian path. And while we were putting it up those 2 days, I mean, it was like nonstop. People were just like, what is happening? And everybody was really excited and supportive. I never go there without talking with people, even since March, right? There'll be people in masks and standing, you know, across the sidewalk. And they're so interested. They want to know all about it. And that part is like, you know, the thinking as much as you can from the perspective of someone who is going to experience it in that way. And again, remember when I kind of mentioned the scale of like, what does 50 feet mean when you're looking at like this like 1,000-foot stretch? You know, it can be kind of like a drop in the bucket. So how can you have impact and affect the people that just casually use this area, because it's something that is like, has been really, I've gotten such wonderful feedback from it. But now I think looking towards the future, and the unintended thing that of course none of us could ever have planned for is that this is this viable art project that has been accessible during the entire time of quarantine, that, you know, we never knew that this was going to be the case. But you know, I can't go down there without a family posing in front of it, or, you know, coming to explore it or something, because it is safe to be out there. You know, people are really spread apart from each other. It is always busy. And so you kind of think about that, something that, and how that affects the way that you would share your work with people and what it would mean, and let that affect that, as well as the physical site itself.
Wonderful. Rebecca, I was also going to bring up a quick question that I thought of that might be helpful for artists maybe making a proposal for public art for the first time, just as far as, you know, Laura showed us some ways that she's made proposals in the past, with whether it's a watercolor painting to share her ideas, or kind of the, you know, 2D model that she made with the swatches and colors. Is there, you know, are those models accepted? You can scan in a drawing, you can make something in SketchUp or a program, or scan in a painting.
Absolutely, 100%. Work with what you know, I would say, and have some idea of how this would translate. And I know for, yeah, in Laura's case, watercolor is the comfortable way to work. For some people, it might be Sculpey clay. Yes, absolutely. Models can be made in a variety of ways. They don't need to be digital renderings. I myself am not a huge fan of the digital rendering for my own work, so I get it. I get it, those people who want to avoid it. If you are good with SketchUp and digital renderings, more power to you. But there's no right way to create it. Create your proposal visuals in a way that you feel you can best communicate the idea. Mm-hmm. And make sure in the image list that you describe what we're looking at. Tell us what it is and how it works as best you can, knowing it's an idea.
Yeah, it can be Photoshop or collage too. I know a lot of
Totally.
you do that. Just go to the site, take a picture, and then even if you, I mean, if you don't know how to do a collage on Photoshop, just cut it up like you're drawing and put it on top of a photo and then scan it. There's whatever works.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Perfect.
Good question. Anyone else have any questions?
I don't see anything in the chat.
We all have Zoom fatigue at this point. Well, thanks for spending your Thursday evening with us. We really appreciate it. I know you all have a lot of other things going on, and even though we're all living in this very strange time, everybody seems to be incredibly busy. So I appreciate it, and feel free to reach out, ask questions. We're here to help you. Thank you, Laura, for a wonderful presentation and for sharing all of your knowledge again.
Thanks for having me. Thank you, everybody, for being here.